What if you could quit your job at age 30 and spend the rest of your life doing things you love? Sounds like the introduction to every Forex course ever, but that's actually what the Financial Independence Retire Early or FIRE movement is all about, or at least in theory. Financial independence means having enough wealth to live the life you want to lead without the need to work. Retiring early means leaving your day job before the classic retirement age in your 60s. Together, these two concepts create FIRE, a movement which promotes the accumulation of wealth in your younger years in order to allow you to retire early and be free from the shackles of a salary. But is this actually possible? And if it is, what would you need to do to achieve it? In order to answer these questions, I decided to learn everything I could about the FIRE movement, and in this video, I'm sharing all of that knowledge with you. When it comes to FIRE, the starting point is establishing a FIRE number. Your FIRE number is the amount of money you need to have invested in order to live off of those investments and quit working forever. You see, investing is a key component of the FIRE movement, as it's the most accessible way to accumulate wealth in your younger years, given that everyone has access to the stock market and cryptocurrencies. So figuring out how much you'll need to have invested to retire early, aka your FIRE number, is the first step on any FIRE journey. The question you need to answer when figuring out your FIRE number is what kind of lifestyle you'd want to lead in a world without work. The more extravagant the lifestyle, the bigger your FIRE number will become, and the harder it'll be to obtain. More frugal lifestyles lead to smaller FIRE numbers, which are more attainable. Once you decide how you'd like to spend your time, you can then start to figure out how much after-tax income is required annually to pay for this lifestyle, and that will bring you to your FIRE number. The formula that FIRE enthusiasts use to calculate their FIRE number is their estimated annual expenses, i.e. the annual cost of their desired lifestyle, multiplied by 25. So, for example, if you expect to spend $5,000 per month, that works out to $60,000 per year, and when multiplied by 25, that gives us a FIRE number of 1.5 million. Meaning, an individual who expects their lifestyle to cost $60,000 per year would need to have accumulated after-tax wealth of $1.5 million in order to retire early. But why multiply by 25? What makes that number so special? The choice of the number 25 is derived from what's known as the 4% rule. Now, if you plan on retiring early and living off of money that you've invested, your biggest fear is that you'll run out of money, withdraw too much from your investments, and you risk blowing through your pot too quickly. Withdraw too little and you risk having an undesirable standard of living. So you need to get the amount just right, and that's where the 4% rule comes in. A study by professors from Trinity University in Texas in 1998 suggested that an individual could withdraw 4% of their accumulated wealth each year in retirement with relative confidence that they wouldn't run out of money. That rule of thumb was adopted by the FIRE movement for the purposes of working out their FIRE numbers. 4% expressed as a fraction is 1/25th, which is where the number 25 comes from in the FIRE number formula. In our example from earlier, we assumed an annual lifestyle cost of $60,000. So, under the 4% rule, we need to figure out what sum of money, when multiplied by 4%, will permit us to withdraw $60,000 per annum. To do that, we can either multiply $60,000 by 25 to get 25/25ths or 100%, or we can divide $60,000 by 4% expressed as a fraction, which is 0.04. In both cases, we arrive at our FIRE number of $1.5 million. So that's what you do if you knew how much your desired lifestyle would cost you each year in retirement. You can play around with these numbers to see how they'd affect your FIRE number. So for example, if your lifestyle will cost you $40,000 per year instead of $60,000, your FIRE number would be $1 million under the 4% rule. That's 33% less wealth you'd need to accumulate in order to retire early. Once you have your FIRE number, you then need to figure out how you're going to achieve it, and this is where things get tricky. There are 3 factors which will determine what you need to do to achieve your FIRE number, and this is what I like to call the FIRE triangle. Number 1, how much you can afford to invest annually. Number 2, the growth rate of those investments. And number 3, how soon you want to retire. We can use a compound interest calculator like this one to help us get an idea of what would need to happen in order for us to achieve our FIRE number. So as a starting point, we'll assume that we're investing $1,500 per month, which is $18,000 per year. We'll assume that we're 25 years old today and we want to retire by age 40, which is in 15 years. And we'll assume that our investment will grow by 8.5% every year, which, if you watched my last video, is the average annual return achieved by Warren Buffett's preferred S&P 500 index fund over a 10-year period between 2008 and 2017. So it's a reasonable assumption. As you can see, we'd end up with just over $500,000 by age 40. Using the 4% rule, that would leave us with about $20,000 each year to fund our lifestyle. Now, if we want more than that, we need to make changes to one or all of these three factors. That brings us to one of the most important things to understand about the realities of FIRE. Any limitations in any of the three factors within the FIRE triangle will require improvements in the other two factors to make up for it. If you're limited with how much you can invest, then you need to increase your expected time until retirement and or get higher growth rates on your investments. If you're limited on how much growth you can obtain, say because you're risk averse, then you need to increase your expected time until retirement and or invest more money. And if you're adamant that you're retiring in a certain amount of years and aren't open to compromise, then you need to invest more money and or get higher growth rates on your investments. Say in this example, our desired FIRE number is $1 million. So we're about 50% short of our target. But assume $1,500 per month is all we can afford to invest. If that's the case, then we need to either reduce our expectations for how soon we can retire by making this number larger, or increase the annual returns that our investments are generating, or indeed a combination of both. By increasing our expected time to retirement from 15 years to 18 years, and by increasing our expected annual return on investment from 8.5% to 12%, you can see that we're now at the FIRE number of $1 million. But here's the first problem. It's not as easy as just getting a 12% annual return. To go from 8.5 to 12%, you'd need to be investing in assets which are more volatile than the market as a whole. Or you could incorporate an element like leverage into your investments. But both of those options add an extra layer of uncertainty around how much you'll have when it comes time to retire. It could be enough, but it could very well not be. The second problem is that extending out the time to retirement kind of defeats the purpose of FIRE in the first place. So because of those two problems, many FIRE participants go to extreme lengths to do everything in their power to maximize the amount of money that they're investing. And that brings us onto why FIRE is considered to be the world's hardest finance challenge. Depending on your FIRE number, you're going to need to adjust your current lifestyle pretty significantly in order to be able to invest the amount of money needed to retire early. That means cutting back on expenses, cutting back on hobbies, vacations, pretty much anything that comes at a cost which is material to you and will hold you back from reaching your FIRE number by your desired retirement age. The shorter your time to retirement and the larger your FIRE number, the more intense this process will be. But what's guaranteed for all FIRE participants is some level of sacrifice to their current lifestyles for the benefit of their future selves. That sacrifice will be greatest for those pursuing fat FIRE, which is where the participant expects their retirement lifestyle to cost in excess of $100,000 each year. Under the 4% rule, fat FIRE participants have a minimum FIRE number of $2.5 million. That number is extremely difficult to obtain over any short period of time, which is why many participants opt for what's known as lean FIRE. Under lean FIRE, participants expect retirement lifestyle costs of no more than $40,000 each year, resulting in a maximum FIRE number of $1 million. Clearly, a FIRE number of $2.5 million will require a lot more sacrifice than a FIRE number of $1 million, depending on your income, of course. There are variations of FIRE, like barista FIRE, where participants take on a part-time and low-stress job in retirement in order to offset some of their annual expenses. I will admit I was confused when I first heard the term barista FIRE, because I know many people who have worked as baristas, and let me tell you, that ain't low stress. But actually, it comes from companies like Starbucks offering their part-time employees health insurance cover, which will be a desirable add-on for someone taking on part-time work. Barista FIRE doesn't necessarily have to be employment either. It could represent a passion project which you've monetized and continue to operate into retirement. And while it's not technically full retirement, I'd wager that many FIRE participants will end up engaging in some form of barista FIRE, even if that's not what they set out to do. With all of that being said, let's talk about the problems with FIRE, and there are many. FIRE is marketed incorrectly as a way for the average person to achieve financial independence early through investing and frugal living. How early you retire is entirely up to you, but let's be real. Most people who are buying into the FIRE movement are looking to retire in their 30s or 40s. However, in reality, only a very small percentage of those average people who attempt FIRE will actually succeed. And there's a very clear reason for this: the FIRE triangle. Average people have average jobs and average salaries. They pay rent and mortgage repayments. They have numerous bills to pay and mouths to feed, and some of them are in debt. Point being, the average person is nearly always going to be limited in how much they can invest towards their FIRE number. Meaning, in order to achieve FIRE, they'll need to either obtain much higher growth in the market as a whole or extend out their time to retirement. Guess what? Over 90% of professional fund managers fail to beat the market over the long term. So for our average FIRE participant, it is laughable to believe that beating the market consistently is a viable option for achieving the FIRE number. That leaves us with extending out our timelines, which in reality just turns FIRE into regular old investing for retirement. Don't get me wrong, there are ways to overcome this. You just need to significantly increase your income and significantly decrease your expenses, or be in a position where you have high income and low expenses to begin with. No biggie, right? In all seriousness, because spending less is generally speaking easier to achieve than earning more, FIRE participants will subject themselves to significant declines in their standard of living, all in the name of retiring early. And if you ask me, it's just not worth it. The fact of the matter is that nobody knows where the markets are going to go today, tomorrow, next month, or next year. All we can do as investors is to make sensible investments consistently over a long period of time. However, because FIRE for average participants demands better than normal returns, it's very likely that investors could find themselves making non-sensible investments in the hope of higher returns. That normally translates into investments where your invested capital is at much greater risk. Also, because FIRE dictates shorter than normal investment periods due to the fact that we want to retire early, we're at a greater risk of not achieving our investment goals at all. That's what people fail to consider. Just because you're doing the things that FIRE participants do, that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to succeed. Nothing is guaranteed. Then there are the variabilities which exist for FIRE participants operating out of different countries. Some countries have higher income tax rates than others, meaning for citizens of those countries, it's automatically going to be harder for them to invest as much to achieve their FIRE number. Even if you manage to get to your FIRE number, some countries will tax realized capital gains far more heavily than others. Meaning, when you start to sell your investments, you'll be left with less after-tax income to fund your retirement lifestyle. Also, because the goal of FIRE is to retire before the normal retirement age, it's unlikely that participants will be utilizing traditional retirement investment accounts to invest for their future, meaning they'll miss out on all of the tax benefits associated with such, which will cost them hundreds of thousands in savings in the long run. Inflation is also going to be different in every country, and the reason why that's important is because of how the 4% rule and inflation interact. If we assume our FIRE number is $1 million, then under the 4% rule, we can withdraw $40,000 each year to fund our lifestyle. But we also have to consider inflation, because inflation reduces the real value of that $40,000. And if we want to maintain a consistent standard of living every year, we need to factor it into our calculations. So if inflation was 5% in the second year after our initial retirement, we would increase our withdrawal amount from $40,000 to $42,000, and we would continue to adjust this each and every year. The problem is that in countries with high inflation, we may have to increase our withdrawals significantly each year in order to maintain a consistent standard of living. If our withdrawals are considerably larger than the amount by which our investments are growing, we run the risk of running out of money much sooner than anticipated. The point is that achieving FIRE isn't as easy as just coming up with a number and working towards it. Every single participant is going to have a unique set of circumstances which must be factored into the equation. Even as improbable as it is to achieve FIRE, there are some good motives behind the movement itself. The practice of frugality and being conscious with your spending is one that we've talked about many times on the channel. In order to achieve financial independence, not necessarily in the next 15 years, but at some stage in your life, it's more or less mandatory to put a cap on your expenses and to allocate more money towards your investments. FIRE highlights the importance of this, albeit to an extreme level. As well as this, FIRE also encourages participants to be financially educated and to be proactive in building the life that they want to lead, both of which are very positive and important. But I think I've arrived at my conclusion on FIRE. FIRE is a Hollywood interpretation of what investing can allow you to do. It is possible to achieve, provided you earn a solid wage and or are fortunate enough to be able to live a life with minimal expenses. Yes, you can do things to increase how much you earn and to reduce how much you spend, but for most people, it's not as easy as just doing that, and it takes time. The FIRE marketing material would have you believe that if you do XYZ, you'll eventually get to this point where you can retire early. But what isn't commonly discussed are the very real challenges presented by taxation, inflation, and perhaps most importantly, the uncertainty of future investment performance. So if you're someone who is thinking of pursuing FIRE, here's something to consider. Instead of subjecting yourself to extreme frugality and fully sacrificing your current standard of living, why not instead do the following? Don't work towards any predetermined number. Invest as much as you can, as often as you can, but without feeling any pressure or guilt to invest any more than what feels right. Fully utilize investment accounts which are intended for retirement investing, because there are far too many tax benefits associated with them for them to be ignored. And perhaps most importantly, understand that investing was never intended to be the sole means by which you become financially independent, especially at a young age. But rather, investing should be one component of many which makes up your infrastructure of wealth. And that's one thing I'll never understand about FIRE enthusiasts. They would much rather spend their time being hyper frugal and investing as opposed to building and scaling successful businesses, which is where real wealth comes from. To me, it just seems much more fulfilling to focus your energy on trying to monetize your passions and have that be the thing that supports you in retirement. Plus, if your source of wealth is your passion, then do you ever truly need to retire in the traditional sense of the word? Just some food for thought. Anyway, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the FIRE movement? Are you currently a FIRE participant, and if so, how are you finding it? If you're not currently participating in FIRE, would you ever consider doing so in the future? Let me know in the comments. So I really do hope you enjoyed the video here today. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please do let me know in the comment section below. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.